Hello, world. Welcome to the Speed Strength Show. I'm Braden.
I'm Tommy. And singing in the car or singing in the shower? Which do you
Oh,
prefer?
that's fun. For me, definitely sing in the car. Definitely sing in the car. Um, I think because I'm more likely to have music playing in the car, and I personally don't like to sing if there's no music playing.
Not a big a cappella guy.
No,
No.
I'm a big sing out loud and get embarrassed kind of guy.
As long as it's along to whatever music's playing.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm singing along to something, then I can match that, and that can mask my voice. And I don't know. I feel like I can match it. But if I'm singing with nothing, I am 100% not hitting any notes that exist.
My preference is definitely singing in the car too.
Yeah.
I like to sing everywhere. I love singing.
Oh, really? I didn't actually know that.
Well, because I don't sing in front of anyone.
Ah, there we
But
go.
sing in the shower, sing in the car, sing while I'm making food, sing while I'm like I love singing. I love that music playing. You know that.
Yes, I knew that.
Um, but yeah, the way I broke it down is singing in the shower is great because of the acoustics. You sound better.
Mm,
It helps with the sound and the range and things like that.
mm,
But singing in the car is a little safer in the sense that, like you said, there's music to play, like to go along with it. Presumably, no one else could probably hear you
hmm
unless you were screaming at the top of your lungs. Because even with the windows closed, they still might be able to hear you. So to me, there's like a sound benefit with the acoustics, singing in the
hmm
shower. There's the security element of singing in the car.
hmm
But the car has the bonus factor that you can use the steering wheel as a drum kit as you sing along, which makes it
Yes.
way more fun,
Yes.
my opinion.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I agree with all that for sure. Even if you're not singing and you're just playing music in the shower, like you're probably concerned about it being too loud for the other people that may or may not be around. And then at the same time, you don't have speakers in the shower, presumably. I don't know your house or whatever, or the audience's house, but unlikely
I've
that you're going
never
to have.
seen speakers in a shower or a
Yeah,
bathroom before. So I'm,
yeah. So then you've got like relatively poor sound quality coming out of your phone or whatever that situation is. So I think that's a big part of it too. For me, yeah, the privacy of the car. Um, but yeah, I'm always, if my hands are free and I'm listening to music, then you're tapping along for sure, for sure. There's no way around that.
yeah, the drum kit steering wheel to me, that was the tiebreaker.
Hmm
When I thought of this question, I was going to, put it out there for the intro.
hmm
I was like, I need to have an answer. Can't
hmm
put that question out there and not have an answer. And so that was my tiebreaker where I was like, oh, which one do I pick? And I
hmm
was kind of like conflicted. I wasn't sure which way I was going to go about it, but the the drum kit steering wheel was the deciding factor for me.
Um,
Singing is so fun, not
yes.
for others, but I think it's fun.
Yeah, I do. If I'm alone in the car, I do definitely think it's fun. If it's songs that I know well, and like there's some songs that are just like that's just a really good song to sing along to. You know what I mean? Like it might not be my favorite listening song, but it's one of my favorite sing along songs for sure.
Yeah, it's like pretty satisfying when you know like all the words and
Yeah.
you can just go along with it from start to finish and just
hmm
sing like no one's listening.
Yeah, and ones that are just nice to belt. Not where you don't have to hit like the touchy soft notes. You can just scream it.
The ones that actually take talent
Yeah, not the talent
and
ones. Yeah,
range.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Um, if you're listening and singing along in the car, do you prefer driving windows down or windows up?
Don't care.
Interesting.
The windows
Interesting.
are usually up or down based on the temperature.
Mm.
So if it's
Well,
cold out, I'm obviously not going to roll the windows down.
yeah.
But if it's, I mean, for me, windows up or down depends on the driving scenario
Mm.
because at higher speeds, you get better fuel economy closing the windows
No.
and running the AC. But supposedly at lower speeds, you get better fuel economy leaving the windows open and not running the AC because the
Hmm.
AC robs the engine of horsepower.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And I
I
don't
mean,
like robbing my engine of horsepower.
yeah.
That's not
Oh,
okay
yeah.
by me.
You're a car guy. Yeah. That makes sense. I didn't know that, but that makes sense. Hmm.
My
But
family will
okay.
listen to this and laugh because they hate to drive with me because I don't like to use the AC.
It's just because of the horsepower thing.
The horsepower and leave the windows open, better fuel economy, better performance.
Wow. Hmm.
If you
I
sweat a
mean,
little bit, who cares?
I've never heard anybody make that. Yeah, I've never heard anybody make that their decision based off of that before.
They make fun of me for not using the AC enough.
Yeah. The first
But
car that I drove consistently, the AC didn't really work. So, like, yeah, I think it had you turned it and then there was 4 notches, and it was basically 1, 2, and 3 did nothing, and then 4 was full power.
so it was all or
Um,
nothing in your car.
all or nothing. But then the the cold temperature didn't really happen either. It was just like, this is just whatever the temperature of air is, it's just being blasted at me.
So you
Like
never
the
used it.
hot. I used it if it was like really hot in the summer, then air being blasted at you is kind of like wind, so it's better than nothing. The hot worked in the winter, which was good, but yeah, in that situation, I'm on the highway, windows down, and I'm blasting the AC. If it's like 35 degrees or something like that.
So I
But
would have been driving by you on the highway and be like, "What is this guy doing? His
yeah,
windows are open on the highway. What a fool!"
I
And then
mean, I
you're
like
probably
that
looking over
sometimes
at me,
too.
be like, "What is this guy doing? How is he going to stay cool if his windows are closed?"
Yeah, I mean, I do, even when the AC works, I do like to have the windows down on the highway sometimes. Harder to hear your music usually, but sometimes it's nice. I just like the windows down. Put your arm out the window if it's like a sunny day and you feel the breeze and stuff. If it's like really windy and you're going fast on the highway, then it's kind of annoying because you just feel like air blasting inconsistently into your ear. But country roads is nice.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the windows up or down has no influence based on my singing
Mm.
or my music that I'm playing, anything like that. So it's other factors that are making me decide if the windows are open, not my music choice or poor singing ability.
No, that's fair. That's fair. To me, I guess it's just like music blasting, windows down, sunny day. It's just a vibe. It
Yeah,
just feels really, really fun.
along with an amazing voice that you're just
That would be
belting out for the
nice.
world to hear.
That would be nice if that was the case. Then you'd feel like you're in a music video all the time if you could actually sing.
Yeah, which I can't. I don't know if you. I've never heard you sing. I don't know. Maybe you can, but
No, I can't.
okay. I
I
wasn't
feel
sure. I didn't want to make an assumption.
no, in my head, if I'm singing along with something, I feel like it's fine. But yeah, if it's out loud, it's bad. And it's coupled by, like, I have zero confidence in my ability to sing, so I don't give it my full effort.
Oh, and
So,
then yeah, that's not a, that's always a dangerous combo.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, maybe one day I'll have the confidence to sing in front of people. Maybe one day I'll have the confidence to do karaoke. That's not my jam at all.
Karaoke's a lot of fun. We don't have
Uh,
time to get into that because I promised you I wouldn't take up the whole episode talking about how much I love singing.
yeah,
But karaoke is fun,
I'm glad that you like it.
and I'll leave it at that so I don't go down that rabbit hole.
um, Here's one thing though. Do you think that you sing better if you're singing alone the whole time, so you have the confidence? Do you feel like there's anything, like maybe it's singing in the car, maybe it's singing in the shower, or maybe it's having a few drinks, that helps you sing better than you normally, that improves your singing performance?
I think I sing best in the shower
That's
because of
cool.
the acoustics.
Hmm.
That
That
would
would
be
be,
my guess.
yeah, that would be, it doesn't work quite as well because it's not Like the drinks maybe would be a smoother transition because it's like you do this thing beforehand and then you experience a benefit later.
Yeah.
Um, but it's
I
still the
do have a
same kind of
video of me
idea.
singing for Rookie Idol with the team. I don't have the video, but of course, people on the team were taking video of it. I
Sure,
could see if I could track that down for you.
that would be fun.
So,
I would personally enjoy that.
um, I mean, the bus apparently did because everyone was filming me.
That's good. But that's
I'll
kind
put in
of
a
a
request. I'll see if I can track that down for you. And
okay.
then you can tell me what you think of it. And then you can decide if you think I could sing better or not.
Okay.
Maybe that was my best performance. Maybe I needed the crowd. Who knows?
Well, I'll need you to sing live for me to decide if I think you can sing better or not. If
Not
I
on
just have
air.
that one to go off of,
Yeah, not on air.
yeah, definitely not on air. But that's kind of a smooth transition into what we're talking about today.
Is it?
Um, well, that's what I was setting up with like the drinks, and then you sing better later.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
clever.
or
That's
like the
clever.
shower
That went right
improving
over
your
my head.
performance. Okay, but we're talking about potentiation today, or post-activation potentiation, which it's recently been getting a new definition, which you'll dig and dive into in a second. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to start off with what it is to me, I guess, and what I've seen in the literature. And you've, uh, well, recently we've both started to look into it a little bit in preparation for this, but also you did your master's thesis project
I did
on
a seminar project.
seminar
Yeah,
project. Okay,
seminar project in my master's
to
on
clarify.
post-activation potentiation. So
So you
I
probably
read
know
a
a
lot
little
of
bit.
papers on it.
Yeah, so you'll know a little bit more than me. So uh, you'll clean up my definition here a little bit, but um,
Only if you really butcher it.
I'll do my best not to. um, but so what I've come across is it's essentially at the base level a conditioning activity influences the performance activity or the test activity later on. And in a lot of the research, especially the earlier research, it was, yeah, like electrical stimulation or maximal voluntary contraction, just an isometric contraction of whatever muscle. And then later they're testing the twitch, which is just a quick stimulation of a muscle fiber, and you measure the response kind of thing and see what the output is like and the speed is like and that sort of thing. Um, and it obviously has an application into training, because if you can improve that twitch, which it's just a small muscle contraction, if you can improve a muscle contraction, then you can theoretically improve performance. So then they've started to use conditioning activities like jumps or squats, things like that, or even just, maximal isometrics in various positions to then improve jumps and sprints and things like that later on as the test activities or performance activities. Um, and what they believe, at least from what I found, to be the cause for this performance enhancement with regards to the twitch anyway, and it's likely similar mechanisms when you start applying it to more uh, bigger, grander scale weight room movements or sport movements, um, is with two things, I guess, is what I've seen more consistently. Um, One being just a higher sensitivity to calcium within the muscle of the myosin light chains, and then having an easier time, faster time producing muscle contraction and force with lower levels of stimulation. Um, and because obviously, if you've got a lot of calcium in the muscle, high saturation being more or less sensitive doesn't really matter. But if you've got a moderate amount of calcium floating around, being more sensitive makes it easier to produce more force. Um, and then the other one was just kind of general CNS neuro potentiation or potentiation of that muscle fiber, that muscle or that movement pattern, and being able to recruit more motor units at a lower threshold was the other thing that I found recurring. And between those two, I didn't find a definitive, this is what it is kind of thing. But yeah, how'd I do?
Not bad, not bad. Yeah, you're definitely right. Like when you talked in the beginning, like it's a mechanism that changes how the muscle functions. Because one of the big things that I'd come across was the idea, the theory kind of came behind how the muscle's movement history
Yeah.
influences the muscle's movement future.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do previously is going to impact what happens next. So if I do a Wingate test and pedal as hard as I can, I build up a lot of fatigue in the muscles. They get tired, they get sore, they run out of energy. Now, if I go to do a movement afterwards, the output is presumably less because there's an element of fatigue and tiredness that's taken place. And most people have probably experienced that before, right? You play a game of whatever, and after you're done, you probably don't want to go play another game right after that because you're tired and your muscles won't work in the same way. And potentiation is kind of the opposite. It's an effect of what can we do at the present time that's going to increase the output of what it is that we're doing later on. So that's kind of where the whole premise of potentiation came from, was how can we influence a present action of the muscle to get more performance out of it later on. Hence the word potentiation. You're kind of supercharging the muscle
Yeah.
for what it's going to do next.
Increasing its potential.
Yeah.
And I did, and that's good that you brought that up, because this idea that what you did in the past influencing what you're going to do in the future is nothing new at all. Like, it's the fact that, yeah, what you did 3 seconds ago is going to be still presumably fatiguing, for the next couple of minutes, depending on your recovery level and that sort of thing. And even, we talk about having like a high and early demanding training day, the next day is a rest day or a recovery day for a reason, because you need that time to recover because you're still being affected by what you did yesterday.
Yeah, it's definitely a consistent thing, and not just potentiation, but in training and physical activity in general. What you've done before is going to influence what you can or cannot do moving forward. And yeah, like you're absolutely right with the common, I've come across the same things where you talked about the myosin light chains and there being a sensitivity to calcium. One of the interesting things I came across too is that it supposedly kind of repositions the, what's it called? The heads of the myosin light chain and the actin and myosin and things like that. So that way there's less space between where the bridge needs to form.
So once they're
the cross bridge, yeah, and the action can actually happen faster, which is probably why, again, probably, it's not for sure, but probably one of the reasons why you see sprinting and jumping and other really rapid actions influenced by potentiation as well, because if it primes that cross bridge to happen faster, that's more than likely going to influence a high velocity movement rather than a low velocity movement.
Yeah. One other thing I did come across, and it makes sense, I think you explaining it that way, was pre-phosphorylation of the myosin. I can't remember which protein does which. I think it's the myosin light chains that do that have the heads.
Grab and pull. Yeah.
So yeah, that could be. It sounds like that's along the same lines of yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting because for my seminar project, I was looking specifically at the effect on sprinting and jumping, like high velocity movements.
Yep.
And that was one of the kind of proposed theories, was that, yeah, this happens, but why does it have such an influence on high velocity movements? Well, it's because you can form a cross bridge quicker.
Yeah.
And if you can form a cross bridge quicker, that will make you jump faster. That will make you run faster. And yeah, I came across the same stuff too with the motor unit recruitment. It allows you to recruit higher threshold muscle fibers that we don't normally use
Hmm.
in a particular activity. And then it allows the nervous system to tap into more potential resources, basically.
Hmm. Did you come across anything at any point like why that would be? Like the calcium I think makes a little bit more sense because if you do like a high intensity contraction, you're releasing calcium into the muscle, and presumably there's going to be just a little bit more floating around, already kind of thing. Or um, yeah, you might if it's especially if it's a high intensity one, then you're kind of asking the muscle to be producing more force than maybe is possible. So then there might be more. I don't know, like the muscle wants to form more cross bridges, I guess, if that makes sense. So I understand the calcium sensitivity makes a little bit more sense intuitively to me. Um, but the motor unit threshold, it's not quite as like it does make sense, I guess, but it's not quite as clear. Um, yeah, did you find anything a little bit like as to why they think that's happening?
I would agree with you. I don't think it's quite as clear
Okay.
as the phosphorylation of the myosin light chains by any means, because the only thing that I've read about is it goes back to like the size principle.
Hmm.
And if you use the presumably near max activity of maximum voluntary contraction of some kind, whether it's in a static movement or a moving action like a squat, that you are now actually recruiting higher threshold units that wouldn't otherwise be tapped into because the force production or the force demands aren't as high. So it's a way to kind of guarantee that those muscle fibers are going to be active. But I agree with you that there's not as much clarity there because the research tends to always refer back to the size principle, at least with the stuff that I was reading.
Yeah.
And
I
size
mean,
principle it makes sense, but like you said, there are a few questions you can ask around it.
yeah. Explaining it that way helps, I think, clarify it for me anyway, a little bit. Because I mean, yeah, if you literally just used this motor unit, like if you're doing a heavy squat, then you're gonna recruit motor units a little bit differently than if you were doing a jump or a sprint. Um, so then if you literally just used this motor unit in a similar-ish way, like if you're comparing a vertical jump to a squat, those patterns are going to be similar. Um, then I could see your CNS like remembering that, and like we just used it, so it's ready to go. We might as well use it, kind of thing. Even if it's just like a practice kind of a thing, if it's just like I see it all the time in powerlifting where especially with newer novice lifters, that rep one of the set is not going to look as good as rep two, and rep three is probably going to look better than that, and eventually fatigue catches up. But you're kind of learning through the set as well, and each rep gets a little bit more consistent, ideally.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and so yeah, unfortunately, I don't really have a better answer than that. Again, based on what I've come across, it's predicated on the size principle.
Mhm.
And I mean, there are a couple of things that were kind of interesting as far as potential changes to the muscle structure as a
Okay.
result of this potentiation process, and also the use of the stretch reflex. So it's again kind of a 50-50 thing. Like it's when you read the literature, the phosphorylation and the higher motor unit recruitment comes up in almost every paper
Hmm.
that's widely agreed upon. These were more like interesting tidbits of information that I found in the odd paper here or there that was looking at stuff. But um, the muscle structure change that could potentially happen from the heavy strength movement, particularly with the isometric stuff they found. If you did a max voluntary isometric action, it can influence the pennation angle to, again, as we talked about, like in the hypertrophy episode,
Mhm.
pennation angle can skew towards velocity of movement or force of movement. And so apparently that helps skew the potentiation, or sorry, the pennation angle in favor of speed,
Interesting.
which is
And
again why you might see somebody do a really heavy isometric action in a squat position and then jump higher
mm,
afterwards. So, I mean, that was kind of just an interesting tidbit of information. Again, there's not enough out there, I'd say, to necessarily confirm it, like some of the other information we found.
yeah,
But
that seems really fast to have
one,
like
I
a
think they were
structural
talking about being a
change.
temporary thing,
Yeah, well, I
which is
imagine
why
it
when
would
we
be.
get into later talk about the recovery period,
Hmm.
why how long you take in between these things could matter.
Hmm.
Because maybe in a certain window of time, you can take advantage of it, but it's obviously not a permanent effect.
Hmm.
So, and then the other one was based around the stretch reflex. And we know that, with some heavier loading of the muscle in terms of force or tension from resistance training, you can make the stretch reflex more sensitive to creating higher outputs. So, again, it would make sense that if you had a heavy movement precede sprinting or jumping or something like that, then if you were lowering yourself quickly in a squat or using the stretch reflex as you were sprinting, you may get more output via the stretch reflex in that activity, which then kind of helps lead to the performance. But again, those were a couple of things that I found in less papers than more. So
Hmm.
I would hardly say it's definitively agreed upon in the stuff that I've read, but
Yeah,
interesting to put out there nonetheless.
for sure. I mean, yeah, that is definitely interesting, and I didn't come across either of those. I think one paper alluded to some sort of structural change, but I didn't really uh, dig into that. But both of those, like it's there's something that the conditioning activity would influence likely, but that's not neither of those as far as what I found in the literature. It doesn't sound like it's the same thing as the potentiation. You know, um, like I think it would help explain some performance enhancement in like the jumps and stuff, but it's not the same as the like in the pure research setting influencing the twitch. I don't think it would.
Yeah. And did you come across any papers on that? Like the difference between the potentiation and the performance enhancement?
Yeah, there was one that was just all it was doing was advocating for a different definition, um, and how what you like the potentiation is literally just measuring how some sort of maximal muscle contraction influences muscle twitch, and that's what potentiation is.
Mhm.
If you're looking at it in a context of jumping or sprinting, anything weight room based or sport based, then you can't call that potentiation because you're not it's a different setting. You're not measuring muscle twitch via electrical stimulation. It's You're measuring performance. Like you're literally not measuring the amount of force this stimulation produces from the muscle. You're measuring distance or time, or it's a completely different variable. So it's a performance thing. It's not a muscular thing.
And it's a
And
much
then
larger scope.
yeah, and then you can assume maybe that the performance enhancement is related to potentiation like effects, but you don't know that, so you can't call it the same thing, was what they were saying.
Yeah. And that was really interesting to read because like the seminar project that I put together was 2017, 2018.
Mm.
And these papers that started to talk about the difference between post-activation potentiation and post-activation performance enhancement all kind of came out in 2020 or 2021.
Yeah,
So
that's
it
when I
seems
started to
to,
see it.
yeah, it seems to be like a more recent shift in terms of what they're talking about, but it does make complete sense because like you said, the potentiation in its truest form is you shoot the muscle with electricity, it twitches a little bit. You get the person to contract and squeeze the muscle as hard as they can, and then they're done. And then you shoot the muscle again with the same amount of electricity, and now that twitch is bigger. So it's happening in a very isolated setting. And like you said, now we're making inference that, oh, well, that first twitch, that could be a jump. That maximum squeezing of the muscle, that's going to be a heavy squat. And then the twitch after that, that's going to be another jump. And hopefully the jump is higher. And I thought it was good that some of those papers were starting to talk about that, because it does seem to be a very different thing. And there's a lot of factors that are taking place in the performance enhancement aspect of jumping, sprinting, squatting, whatever, that isn't there in a true potentiation study. And I think it's good that they've defined that, because you do want to account for those other factors, right? It's no longer just a potential increase in electrical or a twitch response via electricity. There's things to consider that you've warmed up. So now the temperature is changed, and that increases blood flow. That increases the ability for the nervous system to send signals faster. You're now not working with an isolated muscle. You're working with a coordinative aspect of multiple muscle groups working together to produce a movement. So again, I do think it's one of those things that's relevant to research, because it's about getting the semantics right. I don't think from a practitioner standpoint it really matters that much. But I think it is important in the literature that there is a distinguishing difference between post-activation potentiation and post-activation performance enhancement, because the one place where it does matter for us as practitioners or coaches is if we go to look the stuff up. If this is the direction that this field is starting to go, you may search for post-activation potentiation, but what you're looking for is actually post-activation performance enhancement. Because I don't know about you, I've never measured electrical activity in a muscle in a weight room. I've never provided electrical energy to a muscle in that's a laboratory thing. So what we're looking for is the performance enhancement. And so that's what we should be looking for, like searching for, if we're
Yeah.
looking that research up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I can't remember. I think we did some of that stuff in Kin 205.
We definitely did. I remember, and 105
Uh,
as well. I think both.
yeah, but that's the extent of it, for sure. Um, yeah, no, that's a good point to bring up. It's definitely, from a research standpoint and getting into literature, it's good to know where it's going, and then you're gonna likely find more of the stuff that you care about. It's good, obviously, for anybody listening that we clarify that we're mostly talking about the latter in today's episode, the performance enhancement, in today's episode, and probably the next one or two episodes afterwards. Um,
And probably why this will just be called potentiation rather
yeah,
than post-activation potentiation or post-activation performance enhancement,
yeah.
just because talking about it more broadly.
And I mean, I agree with you in a sense that, like, in general, for practitioners, I don't know if it matters too much what you call it, but I think it also, I think it's good to know still, because we've brought up, I guess, four different potential, or five potential mechanisms of, like, what is contributing to this enhanced performance. Was the decreased threshold for higher level motor units, the calcium sensitivity, the pre-phosphorylation, or like the shortening of the gap for the cross bridges, and then you mentioned the pennation angle and the stretch reflex.
Yeah, those could
So
also be involved.
potentially five things, and the research as of yet is not sure which of the first three, or I mean, it could be all of the first three, is contributing to this specific potentiation effect. Um, but if it's that, and then you're caring about the performance aspect, the pennation angle and the stretch reflex are also things that could contribute to, like, increased jump height or increased sprint speed or whatever.
Which is ultimately what we're looking for
Exactly.
as
But
practitioners. That's the output we're looking at.
yeah, but I think it matters. It's not necessarily just the increased jump height or just the increased sprint speed or reaction time, things like that. um it could be a more specific thing that you want to be like, maybe you want to be targeting the stretch reflex specifically. Maybe you want to be targeting the pennation angle specifically, or the, motor unit threshold specifically. And from that standpoint, I think it does matter what you call it, because the post-activation performance enhancement is likely considering all of these things, but the potentiation is just considering a few of them, or one of them probably. And as research progresses, maybe there will be evidence to support, if you're looking to increase the stretch reflex component, then this is the type of exercise you want to be doing as a conditioning activity. If you want to influence the pennation angle, then it's this type of thing. If you want to, you know what I mean? So I think from that standpoint, like, it doesn't matter, because it's all increasing the performance, and that's great, because if you're able to find a way to jump higher and sprint faster in training, then you're going to probably allow your body to push through, whatever plateaus or barriers it has already, like we talked about in the last couple of episodes. But it's still helpful to know what is contributing to this increased performance, so that way you understand what you're doing better, and you can make it more targeted. And if it works, then that's amazing. But if you understand why it works, then you have a better chance of replicating it and improving upon it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think creating that distinction is important too, from a research perspective. Like, perhaps maybe that's the reason we don't have the answer, is because we weren't thinking about it maybe like in the theoretical framework sense in the right way. And now that we're looking at, okay, there's post-activation potentiation, there's post-activation performance enhancement. Maybe now that's going to dive into some further studies that, like you said, look at what's the effective factor A, what's the effective factor B, factor C, et cetera. And we're going to have a better understanding of why this phenomenon is actually happening in terms of improving performance enhancement. Because, I mean, at this point, like you said, we kind of have this theory. We think it's the following things, and altogether they contribute to improve performance, right? Which, I mean, if you look at the studies, what the potentiation stuff looks at is theoretically moving that force velocity curve up and to the right. Sorry, I'm going to, for the viewers, you have to go the other way. Which would then increase the output of muscle activity at any given point along the curve, right? If you shift it upwards. And like you said, it's important to, it shifts it upwards, we get more performance, but we do want to have some understanding of how we got there. And so, like I said, I thought it was interesting to come across and read, because that was one of my thoughts was, this might help distinguish or differentiate what's contributing to performance in what ways, rather than having these question marks next to, is it the stretch reflex? Are there changes in muscle structure? Is it phosphorylation, et cetera, et cetera? What's actually contributing? That might actually help dissect it a little further and give us more options with these types of methods to actually get positive outcomes.
It is interesting to me too, I guess, how it actually influences the muscle, in terms of the performance side of it. Because you just talked about the shifting the force velocity curve up and to the right a little bit.
Yeah.
What I came across was that it's in the middle of the curve. That's what's happening, but at the extremes, it's not really having that much of an impact. So it's like a very, very fast contraction is going to be relatively the same speed, and a very, very forceful contraction is going to be relatively the same force, but all the ones in the middle are going to be faster and more forceful than they would otherwise be.
Which almost
so
all of our
almost
activities happen somewhere in there anyway.
Yeah. So it's almost like it's flattening the curve a little bit, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right that it's the endpoints or the extremes don't get affected. But again, we don't really have any activities that we
Yeah,
really
not
do that
really.
exist in those realms. Or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like to produce the most force possible, you're in an isometric contract, like
Yeah.
you're standing still and producing. But even you could argue that strongman and powerlifting is the quote unquote slowest sport in the world,
Yeah.
in the sense that you're trying to produce the most amount of force possible,
Mhm.
but you still need movement because you have to move the bar from A to B or the stone from A to B.
Yeah.
So, and then same thing, even with like sprinting or jumping, there's still a resistive component. You have to move your body weight, you have to move body mass. So it's still not entirely skewed
Yeah.
to one
That's a good
side,
point.
which is, but yeah, you're definitely correct that the extreme points don't move.
Yeah. That's a good point though, because I didn't think about it that way. I was like maximal force, maximal strength stuff not affected. Okay, so powerlifting, it's not going to affect powerlifting really. And maximal speed stuff, okay, so it's not going to affect sprinting really at all. But it will a little bit. It will a little bit for sure, depending. And I
But
mean,
you're right.
depending
It's
on
the
how you use it.
movements in the middle that are kind of balanced between speed and force that likely have the most to gain from it.
Yes.
If that
Yes.
theoretical model of what it does to the curve is truly what's happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the research, then that is what it is, right? Um, because literally they're taking the same stimulation, the same electrical stimulation, and it's electrical, so they can actually measure what it is, not just some hypothetical like
Give
this is
50% on this jump. Okay, now give 50% on this jump again.
yeah, you can't do that, and you can't, and the same with the conditioning activity, like each 300-pound or each 500-pound squat is a different stimulus. It doesn't matter that it's still the same weight, it's influencing your body differently. But yeah, so same conditioning activity, same stimulus is now producing more force, and uh, and in the same amount of time, I believe, as well. um, so yeah, literally a faster, more forceful contraction with the same stimulus. And yeah, that's going to be good for performance.
Yeah, and that's the difference between that like potentiation and the performance enhancement or
Mm,
the performance effect was like you mentioned, it's such a controlled, calculatable, measurable thing,
mm,
which compared to assessing sprinting, squatting, jumping, human movements, there's a lot of variability, even in
mm.
the, like you said, the same movement. There's going to be a lot happening. So, but yeah, like I'm also glad that we did this because I do base anything like someone's like, oh, potentiation or contrast training or anything like that. I tend to think back to, what did I learn in the seminar project? And that was only a couple of years ago, but things are still moving. Things are always moving forward. Things are always progressing. So I'm glad that we dove in to look at it because it does seem like this year or last, it was starting to take maybe a different route and
Mm.
shaping a little bit differently. And so the things you may have looked at 4 or 5 years ago from a performance enhancement standpoint might be radically different now as new research comes out and people start to focus on that direction. So it's good to know that that's where the field is moving because that's where you're going to find the info.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, maybe in the next 10 years or whatever, we'll have a definitive answer what's going on.
We hope.
Mhm.
But I mean, so I mean, that's kind of the theory behind it, right?
Mm.
There's this, the muscle's influenced by history of what it's done before. And we're trying to positively enhance that so that the future output of the muscle is better. And it's via, like you said, some sort of conditioning activity and then the actual activity that you want to see the performance improvement in. But the big question is, does it work? Yes or no? Like that's kind of, I think, where we're getting to now and where we'll get into in the next few episodes is like, does it work? Is it a viable tool. Theoretically, in the lab, it works. But what happens
Mhm.
when we go into the real world? And like we said, we throw all these other factors in.
Mhm. Well, and I mean, I think the research says yes, it does. Um, Obviously, based off of everything we just said, we're not 100% sure why. Um, but yes, it does, and it depends on a lot of stuff.
That's what I was going to say. I have written here, yes, but the conditions need to be right. And there's a lot of trial and error.
Yes, yeah, oh yes, and there's so many conditions that it depends on. I found, well, obviously, like the very clear one is the amount of potentiation versus the amount of fatigue was one that found a lot, and I found several studies. Obviously, it's just a guess, but graphing, you know, immediately after the activity, potentiation is high and fatigue is also high, and then fatigue dissipates, and ideally, fatigue dissipates faster than the potentiation dissipates
And then you're
because they
left over with
and yeah,
extra
with a
performance.
exactly. Um, that was the big one that continued to come, and everybody was talking about that. Um, but then the fatigue is obviously going to be impacted by the rest time. So you want to be waiting long enough that the fatigue is gone, but not so long that the potentiation is also gone. Um, and the amount of fatigue you get versus the amount of potentiation you get is going to be dependent on the type of activity you're doing as a conditioning activity and the intensity and volume of that activity as well.
Yeah, there's so many things that influences it. So I mean, I think it is important to highlight that, it obviously does work to some extent, or else there wouldn't have continued to be a lot of work and research and diving into it. But yeah, it's a trial and error
Mhm.
process where there are a lot of studies that show an improvement. Um, but a lot of these studies show improvements with very different methods in very different ways. And so then it becomes really difficult to filter through what is working, what is not working. And I mean, two of the big things to me that are connected to the, like, does it work? And the answer is yes, it depends. Is, to me, there's, I think, 2 points that kind of are important to go along with that. And one is that when you're looking at the research, significant difference doesn't matter.
Yeah, not at this
Significant
level.
difference matters from a research perspective, and alphas and powers and research statistics and et cetera. But like, when I came to the conclusion in the seminar project that it worked, I was going under the presumption that statistical significance doesn't matter. Because as a coach or a practitioner, if you tell me an athlete ran a tenth of a second quicker or jumped 3 centimeters higher, and that wasn't statistically significant, I'm still taking that performance improvement. I still want that because it could make a difference in the activity. So I think it's important to highlight too, if you are going to go look at the research or look at stuff and then decide, does it work, yes or no? As a practitioner, you do kind of have to ignore the statistical significance and actually look at the numbers and then go, what did they improve by? Because if they
Mhm.
did improve, then it could help you. And the other interesting thing is that it's not a magic tool that unlocks like this, I guess I'll call it free performance, right? Like, it's not like you're capable of jumping 30 inches in a vertical jump. And now all of a sudden, through some of these methods, you're capable of jumping 32 inches. And you made an extra 2 inches of jump height that you never had before. It's a tool to help you reach the ceiling that you actually have.
Mhm.
And I fell into this trap. I mean, what to me initially was like, oh, potentiation, contrast training, this type of stuff that's kind of cool, is like, oh, I could immediately add X level of performance to what I'm doing. It's going to make me faster. It's going to make me jump higher than I actually can. And in terms of the one-time effect, it doesn't unlock free performance. It's a tool that helps you reach the ceiling.
Hmm.
So you still need to have things in place or consistently put these things in place to push the ceiling higher and higher. And
Hmm.
so to me, those are just two important things to consider in the does it work, yes or no? Because if part of the reason you're doing it is, oh, the research said it's statistically significant, or I'm not going to do it because it said it's not significant, don't let that influence that decision. Go look at the actual numbers and see what improvements happening. And same with the magic, sort of this magic bullet free performance aspect. If you're doing it because you think it's just going to magically improve output on jumping and sprinting and throwing and other activities that are kind of hard to improve, it's not going to be that either. So you're going to be disappointed with the return on your investment,
Hmm.
essentially.
Yeah, no, those are good points for sure. And the former obviously applies to, any research really that has an impact on performance, sports, weight room, or otherwise. Um, and that if you're at the highest level, those little bits matter. So I think when you're looking in the research, it's important to consider the population that they're researching, because if it's an untrained population and they found an insignificant improvement, then it very well could have just been they did another sprint and they happened to have stumbled upon better technique this time, you know, or they happened to have stumbled upon a better jump technique this time. So it's in those situations it maybe isn't as important. But if you're looking at, collegiate level sprinters, they know how to sprint. They're not going to accidentally run a tenth of a second faster than they ever have. That will never happen. It's going to be intentional. So with that in mind, you can kind of draw the conclusion. But even if it's insignificant, even if it was like a low number of participants in the study, if you have a tool that you can undeniably say this helped one person, then you know that it works,
Yeah,
at least for some people. Maybe it was just that person, but it worked for that person. So you would be a fool if you didn't work that into their training at some point. you
exactly.
know so that's a good point to bring up, for research in general. um, and then that's another good point as well, about it kind of unlocks the potential that you already have. It doesn't make you capable of more all of a sudden. um,
Because I'll be honest, that's what I thought. I was like, man, if I do this, I'm going to sprint faster.
and I think that's
And
what
it's
a lot
not
of
because
people
I'm
thought.
sprinting faster magically. It's because I'm getting closer to the ceiling. It's
Yeah.
not unlocking something I never had before.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I've definitely thought that for sure. And I think a lot of people have thought that kind of thing. But it's still valuable, obviously, for uh, a performance. If you're performing in like a throws, like any kind of track and field type event, where if you can include something like this in your warm up, that literally helps you get closer to your ceiling when you need to be as close to your ceiling as possible,
Definitely
then
helps.
you do that, right? And in just a normal training standpoint, training closer to your ceiling is going to help you push your ceiling. um, and that's we talked about that 2 episodes ago with the speed plateau stuff, with some of the like the reverse banded, like over speed training kind of thing, where if you can um, introduce higher velocities than you're used to, then you're going to learn how to control those higher velocities, and then your body will give you access to higher velocities. And this is essentially the same thing, just creating it in a different way.
Yeah. And so, like I said, to me, I think those are just important to bring up because that should be part of the decision making as a coach or a strength coach or someone who's working with athletes if you're deciding to include or not include these methods. And so, and then of course, like we don't have time in this episode to get into the it depends of the does it work. But there's, obviously you consider those factors and then you decide, okay, yes or no, am I going to use this? If the answer is yes, then you have a lot of things to it's a long list of things that you have to consider in terms of playing around with. So, and again, I
Yeah.
don't think there's time in this episode. That'll be probably a whole separate episode. There's enough content there. There's a lot.
Yeah. We touched on it a little bit, but yeah, there's a lot of things to dive into there. And even just like outside of that stuff, if you're just deciding whether or not to include this in your training at all, I mean, you need to know if it works. You need to be willing to take the time to figure out what's going to work for which person, because like you said, there's a lot of variables. But it's also like it's adding time to your training sessions. And I mean, you're adding exercises, which is adding injury risk potentially as well, depending on the exercises you're going into. And even
If you
like if
decide to
you're,
use it, it's going to influence what your training session looks like in
yeah,
some way, shape, or
absolutely,
form.
absolutely. And even if you're only doing this for the potentiation side or the performance enhancement side, then it's a lot of effort for something that's only, it's giving you just a small benefit. And like the small benefit matters, but if all that effort is otherwise wasted, then that's something to like, just a quick example, like if you're pairing squats, heavy squats with sprints, a heavy squat is a lot of effort, and working up to 90% plus of your 1 rep max is a lot of effort and a lot of time and potentially extra injury risk. And if you don't care about the strength benefits that's going to give you, if like outside of the performance enhancement side of it, you wouldn't be squatting at all, then that's something to consider.
Like you said, yeah, it's a lot to put in. There's probably an easier way to do it.
Yes.
And maybe
Exactly.
a more, what's the word I'm looking for? More probable outcome. Like
Yeah.
some like the potentiation stuff it really depends. You can probably find something it's predicated less on it depends, and it's not a sure thing, but more of a sure thing.
Mm-hmm. And on the contrast, if you would be doing that stuff anyway, then here's an idea of how you can structure your workouts to maybe get a little bit of extra benefit out of the things that you're doing. But yeah, lots of stuff to consider, lots of stuff to play with that we'll get into next time.
Yeah, I'm stoked for the next episode because I feel like talking about all the factors, and then, like I said, we probably need an episode to talk about the factors, and then we probably need an episode to talk about like what are you actually going to do in training or some ideas. I don't know if you've used it at all.
No, but after looking into all this stuff, I'm excited to play with it on myself. And
so that's what I mean. So
I have ideas of how it can work with powerlifting stuff. So
yeah, so it's probably going to be like the hypertrophy one where it's another episode of whatever, and then an episode of like, how do we apply it? What ideas? Like, how do we actually use this information to give us something worthwhile?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm stoked for the next
one.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, me too.
It's always fun to answer the question. It depends.
Yeah, it is for sure. I'm also stoked to hear what you've been listening to this week in your home gym.
Very different stuff.
Or in the car, actually, or in the shower, since we've started off the top with music as well.
Or are we changing it now to what are you listening to what are you singing?
I mean, we could. It sounds like it's the same thing for you.
It sort of is. I do sing along to everything. No, a little bit different this week. I've been listening to a lot of punk.
Nice.
And when I say punk, I mean just one band. I'm obviously listening to the other stuff, but I've made a point every day of listening to Boston Manor. I don't know why. I just I'm like, yo, their stuff is catchy. And it's stuck in my head. And I just keep wanting to listen to their stuff. It's like I said, it's very different from what I usually listen to. It's not hard bass, EDM, dancing. It's not, aggressive and, heavy metal type music. It's just completely different. But yeah, I can't stop listening to their stuff. Every single day that I put on music, I make a point of like, oh, I'm going to listen to some Boston Manor, and then I'll go listen to some other stuff.
That's cool.
I don't even know if they're punk. They might be like pop punk, or I don't know the exact genre they are, but it's catchy and I can't stop listening to it. And I don't know why, but I like it. So I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fun genre. That like pop punk area is a fun place to be. And I mean, it's fun when you start listening to something, and not that this was the first time you've ever listened to them, but just it's fun when you hear something and you're like, that's it. And you just, I mean, like I still listen to BTS often, and it's fun to be in that trench of, you know, musical enjoyment, I suppose.
The only thing that sucks is I haven't learned all the words yet. So the singing along part isn't quite as fun, but I'll
Hmm.
get there. I'll get there.
I was gonna ask you if you sing along with like Tiesto and those DJs, if there's enough there for you to, or if you're just humming.
Usually just humming, and a lot of them don't have words in them,
Yeah.
or I'm not really sure what they're saying,
Hmm.
but I do. If there's words, I sing along
Nice.
100%. If there's
Nice.
words, I'm singing
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Hmm. I was still listening to a good amount of Billie Eilish. I'm definitely enjoying her stuff, but I did also make a point to, when I was in the gym, what you talked about last week. I was like, maybe I'll go listen to some Daft Punk or Tiesto. I didn't, because as I was searching them, I remembered, oh, one of my favorite DJs is Timmy Trumpet. So I'll listen to that guy. Um, and that was great. That was really nice because I mean, I also enjoy the EDM and that sort of stuff too. So uh, just not quite as much as you, I guess,
And
usually.
you had sent the song to me. The
Billie Eilish, bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I forget what exactly I texted you back, but it was something along the lines of I've never heard the song, but that little snippet from the chorus, minus the words, I've heard in a commercial somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. The beat, I think you said, or the,
Yeah,
the rhythm. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sample track in the background, I've heard somewhere in a commercial.
Hmm.
So, but now I've listened to the song at least once, so I can say I've heard it.
Yeah.
So,
There you go. There you
but I
go.
because we did talk about that on air, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to follow up with you on air
Hmm.
and
I
not let it
appreciate
be
that.
forgotten about.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah, this Boston Manor is intriguing to me, so maybe I'll have to give them a listen.
Yeah, they're catchy. I'm pretty sure I first heard it somewhere in the weight room here in Alberta,
Hmm.
like 3 or 4 years ago. And then I came across one song. I'm like, oh, I've heard this song before. I
Hmm.
heard this in the weight room because a lot of people there like to play punk stuff.
Hmm.
And that's what sent me down the rabbit hole. And it was just so catchy.
Yeah, well, there you go. So good stuff. But yeah, good talk today, and be another couple of good talks coming up.
Yeah, we're gearing up for some good ones here. I'm looking
Hmm.
forward to it. It's going to be
And
sick.
yeah, and if anybody has questions, this will come out, I think, before we record potentiation 3. This should come out before then.
It should, yeah.
Um, so if you have any questions about this stuff or anything you want us to talk about, let us know, or anything else, let us know on Instagram, Speed Strength Show, Speed Strength Performance, or Braden Southern, and we'll do that for sure. Um, yeah. Anything else?
Nah,
No.
I'm good.
Good.
Fun one. Looking forward to the next few.
Yeah. Then yeah, that was the Speed Strength Show. Thanks for coming along, world.
We'll see you next week.
Peace.